Father of Anxiety here again. I just wanted to make a short video about the importance of empathy in recovering from anxiety disorders and depression. And this might seem like you might wonder, well, why is empathy so important? And, exactly how this, is essential in recovering from these conditions. But I think I'm just going to give a couple of different important reasons why, not only from us, but also from the people around us whom we care about and love, both ways we're going to have to show empathy. So the first thing I want to mention about empathy, obviously, it's the ability to put yourself in someone else's place, okay, essentially, without overcomplicating the definition. And this is something that, in my experience, in my years on this earth, is not easy for humans to do. It tends to be very difficult. We might be able to do it for the people who live in our household or whom we care about deeply, but we tend to really stink at it when it comes to, people that aren't as close to us. All you have to do is look around at the world that we live in. And, a lot of the times people are mainly just concerned about themselves, and they have a really hard time putting themselves in other people's situation to understand why something might be a certain way. And you can see this in the political climate. You can see this with race relations. You can see this in all the countries throughout the earth. So empathy is not a natural thing. So it's something that you are going to have to actually consciously do. And it is going to be an essential part of recovering from serious anxiety disorders and clinical depression. And the first thing I'll do is I'll explain it from the perspective of why we, as the people suffering from these terrible mental health conditions, why do we have to show empathy? You're thinking, shouldn't they have to empathize with how bad these things are for us? These racing thoughts, these intrusive thoughts, this catastrophizing, these physiological symptoms that we're feeling that are so frightening and, so scary to deal with. How about they show empathy to us? We might be thinking that, and it's true ultimately, and I'll get into that with my next point. But initially, what's going to happen when you are clinically depressed or when you are experiencing a serious anxiety disorder is the people who love you, who are around you and see you every day, are going to be very perplexed. They're going to think, it's going to look from the outside like you're, like you're quitting. They're not going to see anything wrong. You're probably going to go to the doctors and get tested for a million things. Everything's going to check out okay. And their initial thing is going to be, what's going on here? Is this like are you quitting on our family? Is this a cry for help? What's going on? There's nothing wrong with you. Oh, you're down. Life is tough. Come on, pick yourself up. Life's tough for me too. These are the things that you're going to have to deal with. You're going to have to deal with people thinking that's all in your head. And, why would you do this? Why would you do these things and stop living? And, why aren't you going to work? Why? All the things that start happening when we have a serious mental health disorder such as anxiety or depression. And, anxiety and depression too, it can look like you just don't care, right? And now you got to put yourself in their place or you will end up not liking them anymore. Because imagine if the shoe was on the other foot. Someone you'd been married to or lived with for years, who you knew exactly who they were as a person and you could count on. All of a sudden, they can't drive. They're having a hard time going to work. Debt is climbing. all kinds of things, and they're not helping out with the children. Put yourself in their shoes. What would you think? And now, okay, so maybe initially you're supportive and say, okay, well, let's go to the doctors and figure out what's going on. You know, you're dizzy, you don't feel well, you're having stomach issues. So you go to the doctors, and now everything's checking out with the doctor. You know, oh no, the test came back negative. So now they're thinking, well, what's going on? You know, get it together. How would you feel if somebody basically it felt like someone was quitting on your family? You know, this would cause you to maybe feel the same way that they feel initially. Initially, I want to stress initially. But this is where you need to have that empathy so that a relationship doesn't end up getting permanently damaged or destroyed because somebody reacted in a way that they shouldn't because they didn't understand the condition. This isn't because they don't love you or because, you know, they think, you know, deep down that you're quitting on them. It's like they just don't understand it. And that's where empathy on your part is going to, especially, you know, empathy is going to be really hard when you're in the throes of a deep depression or an anxiety disorder. But as you recover and you're trying to mend those relationships, it's going to be essential that you put yourself in their shoes so that the relationship can recover. And I've had to experience this firsthand. My wife is, you know, a saint, and she tried to help me through it in the beginning before she understood what was going on. But definitely there were times when she didn't understand what was going on, and there's opinions that are hurtful, and you know, they can destroy your relationship if you let it, if you don't put yourself in the other person's shoes and empathize with what they're going through. So this is something that I don't hear talked about a lot, but I think it's the way a relationship recovers. And, you know, I'm not telling you guys anything that's difficult to understand. Empathy is usually a byproduct of love. And love is important. You need this in relationships, and you need it to put up with other people's, you know, mistakes, because we all have warts, guys. If you look at us as human beings, if you look at us under a magnifying glass, or even just live with us every day, we all have giant warts. And if someone loves you, they'll overlook the warts. Just to illustrate this really quickly, how about when someone picks on, you know, a sibling? Maybe they're a sibling that you fight with all the time, but someone says something about them that is unfavorable. How quickly do you come to their defense? See, because, you know, that feeling, that love, I might be able to say something bad about my sibling, but you better not. And that's the same type of relationship that you need to have with those in your family, obviously, who are close to you, friends. You have to be able to, again, put up with other people's shortcomings or when they're living through a difficult time here. So that's the first part of empathy that's important. It's going to be important for you as the sufferer of one of these anxiety conditions or depression to, as you recover, put yourself in the place of the people around you who maybe end up saying hurtful things because they don't understand what's going on. Now, from the perspective of the people around the people experiencing the mental health issue, guys, this is where you need to show empathy to these to the sufferers of these terrible mental health conditions, because you're already so far down with clinical depression and anxiety disorder that you feel like you're on a ledge. And if you feel like the people around you are giving up on you or think it's what you actually want, you actually don't want to do the things you enjoy, you actually don't want to be an active participant in your life, you actually don't want to go to work, you actually don't want to pay your bills, and just all the things that are going to happen if you're really suffering with clinical depression and anxiety, you know, they're going to need to put themselves in your shoes. And over the years, my wife and I have been able to convey this to her by highlighting how certain things actually feel. And I give my wife a lot of credit here, because for someone neurotypical or someone who doesn't experience panic attacks and anxiety disorder and clinical depression, it is really difficult to look and watch somebody who's not maybe physically sick, but who's clearly spiraling in a bad way. But my wife has also, you know, I've been able to get her to empathize with certain things by explaining what certain things are like as I've recovered. What it's like, the feeling that it's like when you're experiencing a panic attack. And ironically, my wife has actually had 3 panic attacks since I recovered. And so now she knows. She knows what was going on with me every day. Now, that was a, you know, you could call it fortunate or unfortunate, depending on your perspective. So she actually knows kind of what I was going through with my panic attacks. But, you know, you have to put yourself in the place of this loved one who's suffering. And guys, for those of you who maybe are in relationships or related to people or have friends who are suffering with anxiety and depression, I've got a million videos on this channel to tell you how horrible that is. How much you don't want to not do the things you love. How much you want to live your life. How much of a prison you're trapped in. How horrible it is to not have feelings. To not feel the electrical impulses of joy and happiness. This is horrible. And in order to empathize from the perspective of the person who's not suffering, guys, usually you've known the person for a while. Is this completely out of character for them? If it is, think about it. And now put yourself in their place. If somebody said, hey, I've got a proposition for you. You can feel like you're dying every day and stop doing all the things you enjoy and stop and just, you know, basically destroy all the relationships in your life. You can do this. Would you choose to do that? Was that what you'd want to do? Or you can have the existence you have? I mean, come on. When I started having panic attacks, I put on about 130 pounds. I was, you know, just so unhealthy and miserable. And it would be incomprehensible for me to think that people who loved me thought that was the condition that I wanted to be in. Incomprehensible. So this is where that empathy is going to be essential from the loved ones as you recover. Again, this is so that your relationships recover, because you're both going to, on each side of the equation, you're going to make mistakes. There's going to be times when they say something they shouldn't and show a lack of empathy and understanding for your condition. And there's going to be a time when you aren't putting yourself in their place, and how perplexing it would be to watch somebody whose tests are all coming back okay when they're being checked for their health, yet essentially have a complete personality change. So, you know, I just want to do a quick video here. So empathy is going to be important both for the sufferers and those around the sufferers, the friends, the relatives, and for you, depending on where you are, whether you have someone in your life who's suffering from these conditions or whether you are that person. And guys, what's going to carry you through, and this is going to sound very cliche, but it's love. Love is what's going to do it. If you love somebody, you're going to put up with their little idiosyncrasies, if you want to call them that, their warts, and you're going to work through things. This is what love is all about. Because, like I said, if you want to look at the negative in every human being you know, there's going to be plenty to find. I'll save you the suspense on that one. Nobody is going to hold up under a microscope. And what you need to do in these relationships, and again, I'm not a relationship counselor or anything, but love needs to prevail. And love will lead to that empathy that you guys are going to need to recover the relationships that get damaged by clinical depression and anxiety. And I just felt it was important to, people who follow the channel to know this, because a lot of you guys are probably recovering, or maybe have recovered, or have yet to start. But I want to give you guys the information that I think is going to help you get your relationship straightened out, because oh my goodness, the damage that these anxiety conditions and that clinical depression can do to relationships that mean everything to you. But recovery is possible. And it's those relationships. My wife and I are not, again, this is not to say in a bragging way, and every day is a new day, but our relationship's never been stronger than it is right now. And, this is because of the love and the empathy that we've both had to show over the last, 22 years here that I've been suffering with these conditions. So just wanted to make a video to help you guys out, help you with your relationships, and help you recover from these conditions. Guys, thanks so much for the engagement with the channel. I really appreciate it. If you know anybody in this situation, let them know about the channel. Like, share, subscribe. And until my next video, guys, take care.